As I've stated before, the breadth of material in comics is such that just about anybody can find something they enjoy if they look hard enough. The problem, again, is that too much of this diversity exists only in the alternative press, which has a lower profile than the larger publishers. Getting these comic books out into the open and increasing their exposure in specialty shops that usually only order mainstream superhero books is one step in increasing their recognition. The next important step to take is in getting the word out. Comic books desperately need advertising and publicity that will counteract the bad reputation they've endured for so long. For as long as they've existed, comic books have done little, if any, advertising in the conventional sense. The lack of advertising for comic books seemingly stems from comic books' history as extensions of the newspaper business. Since comic books were originally distributed everywhere that magazines and newspapers were, one didn't have to go far to find one. Plus, they didn't cost much at all, so there was no reason to go to any great length to persuade a person to buy a comic book. Advertising wasn't strictly necessary. Unfortunately, as the industry shrank and the price of comic books grew, there was apparently no thought put into advertising. It seems as though it was taken for granted that comic books would always be around and people would always be buying them. Recent history has shown the folly of such an assumption. There are plenty of opportunities for comic book advertisement if one only takes the time to look. Considering how much comic books have been co-opted by other forms of mass media, it really shouldn't be much of a stretch to inject some advertising for comic books into popular culture. Just look at how many big-budget comic book movies have been made recently, and how many more are waiting in the wings. Several animated series based on comic book characters air on several television channels, and WB's Smallville is a phenomenal hit watched by millions. Would it really be so difficult to include some sort of ads for the source material these shows are based on? Something as simple as a tagline at the end of the program saying, "Continue following the adventures of," insert character name here, "by visiting your local comic book store," or something to that effect. Followed by www.themasterlist.com or 1-888-comic-book. That would do the trick. Comic Book's parent company is AOL Time Warner. Wouldn't they have a vested interest in such advertisement? On its website, Marvel once had a series of brief, flash animated previews for comic books in the style of movie trailers, using images and dialogue from the comics, and they even had soundtracks. They were fairly impressive and made it plain that the comics weren't just for kids. With the string of successful films based on Marvel properties, it should have been a no-brainer to include comic book trailers like these along with the regular previews during showings of Marvel movies. It certainly would have been an improvement over the completely unrelated soft drink and sports car commercials that had begun to infiltrate movie theaters. Yet the trailers weren't there, and several opportunities to advertise to audiences who obviously had an interest in Marvel characters was lost. Undoubtedly, there are financial considerations, and movie studios will want to include trailers for other movies since they hold a wider, more general appeal, but this is somewhat short-sighted. Advertising for comic books would strengthen the appeal of the properties, which spells more interest in movies based upon those properties, and that leads to more money for the movie studios. The possibilities of comic book advertising aren't limited to just the major publishers, though they are the ones with the most potential in terms of recognition as well as financial resources to make use of large-scale advertising. Promoting comic books as a whole, in terms of their entertainment value, can yield positive results. Previous ad campaigns for comics have failed because they were too specific to a particular publisher or group of characters, such as the Ultraverse ads in the mid-1990s. There are a number of advocates of a large-scale comic book advertising campaign similar to the industry-specific milk, cheese, and pork campaigns, which don't advocate for a specific brand name but the product in general. While this is a great idea, there should be a great deal of care in just how it is presented. It could potentially have the opposite effect of solidifying misconceptions about comic books if the ads come off as juvenile or silly. While large-scale ad campaigns have great potential, I think there's also an important market for more localized advertising. Ads for specific comic book publishers, titles, or genres can be utilized in various areas suited to the ad content. College newspapers, for instance, can carry advertisements for the many literate and thought-provoking comics published by Fantagraphics and Top Shelf. Reader's Digest and several similar magazines can advertise a wide variety of comic books. Any publication that reaches an audience of children, teenagers, or avid readers of any age is a potential source for comic book advertising. High school newspapers, community papers and magazines, teen magazines, and self-published zines are just some of the possibilities. The key point is that these local ads should not generally be restricted to a single publisher, but should promote comic books in general and make it clear that there is a variety of subject matter available. The ads could be structured so that information for local comic book shops would be included within the ad space, so readers would know where to get their comics. Thus, publishers and local businesses would both benefit from the ads. There are even cheaper methods of guerrilla advertisement that could be employed, passing out flyers at schools, concerts, and other public venues, putting up bulletin board ads at local independent stores and in campus residence halls, leaving small flyers and leaflets at libraries. There's almost no limit to the possibilities when creative options are explored. Local advertisement would work well for comics due to the nature of the direct market, which relies on the independently owned specialty stores. And if comic books are distributed to other outlets beyond the direct market, other local businesses would stand to benefit as well. And consumers responding to those ads would have an easier time finding new comics to check out.